Centrifuge, a sculpture for all Burnsville to enjoy. How does an idea go from the mind of an artist to the bronze statue now located in Nicollet Commons Park? In early 2003, the Burnsville Public Arts Committee invited artists to submit plans for a sculpture that would be placed in the new Heart of the City Nicollet Commons Park. From the proposals received, 4 were selected to be reviewed and interviewed. The criteria used to narrow the field were the artistic merit of the proposed project, the compatibility of the artist's proposal with the site, the durability of materials, and by the artist's background, experience, and quality of previous work. Sculptor Foster Willey Jr. of Northeast Minneapolis won the honor unanimously. Once the selection was made, paperwork was sent to the Heart of the City Steering Committee and the Burnsville Foundation to raise funds to pay for the sculpture. In May, the funds were secured, so the piece and the artist were presented to the Burnsville City Council for final approval.
And I think without further ado, I'll put this off so we can put the sculpture. The title of the sculpture is Centrifuge, and the sculpture is entitled Centrifuge, was conceived with elegance and grace, and it depicts an object that is expanding from its center. The center is signified by a negative space, and that is actually this kind of open area in the middle. And the surface of the sculpture will be lightly textured, and reveal the hand of the artist. Just as Heart of the City seeks to become the focal point for the community of Burnsville, Centrifuge then becomes the focal point of Nicollet Commons Park and symbolically represents the character and spirit of Burnsville. A vibrant center, expanding, growing, and defining its identity.
Using his drawings and models for scale, Foster went to work. In order to create a bronze statue, a life-size model must be made to use for a mold. Foster started with a turntable and a base in his studio, to which an armature of wood was erected. Styrofoam was then cut to the basic shape of the armature and attached to the wooden base. Sculpting and trimming of the armature and styrofoam began by the use of a chainsaw, chisel, hot knife, and saw to achieve the desired shape. When the basic form of centrifuge was established in styrofoam, a thin layer of clay was added evenly and smoothly onto the entire base. The clay comes in hard bricks, which were softened in a microwave so he would be able to sculpt it onto the top of the smooth clay base. Here you can see what Foster meant by hand of the artist being an integral part of the piece. He places bullets of clay onto the base, molds it with his hands, and scrapes some areas down. He also uses a hook to mark, shape, and mold the clay. By November, this stage was complete, and Foster invited the Arts Committee to review the sculpture. Centrifuge is 6 feet by 12 feet, too big to get out of the studio in one piece or for the foundry to cast in one mold. So Foster consulted with Wes Jones of Creative Castings to section Centrifuge for individual castings for the bronze pours. They drew and numbered the sections onto a small model. This would be the roadmap for Foster to make the wax impressions to take to the foundry and for Creative Castings to be able to make the ceramic molds the right size to fit into their ovens. When the areas were established on the large model, latex was mixed in small batches and the sections were quickly filled. The latex will pick up the impressions from the clay in all its details so it can be transferred to the bronze. The latex dried, plaster was mixed and added over the latex sections. At first, the plaster is loose, actually runny, and takes a while to grab. It can't be too thick because it sets up too fast. Cloth mesh squares are added to the plaster mixture, then put onto the sculpture for strength. Each section has to be hand-built, thicken the middle and edges, again for strength, and done quickly because the plaster is setting as Foster works. When the plaster mold sections are completed, they are pulled off, numbered according to the small model, and ready to receive the layers of wax that are put onto the mold. Chunks of wax have to be melted down and kept hot, so they may be painted, not poured onto the molds. Foster dips out a small amount of wax so it will stay warm enough to be brushed onto the latex. Several passes have to be made to build the wax up to 1/4 inch. He does a cross-patch pattern to even out the wax layers. When dry, each piece has to be cleaned off and inspected to see if it is consistently thick enough to make the actual bronze piece. It is also checked against the mold for fit. With each piece waxed and cleaned, it is time to pack up the numbered molds with the wax pieces and move them to the foundry. The foundry really just needs the wax impression, but to keep them safe, they are moved in the entire mold. The pieces are carefully loaded into Foster's truck with the help of his sister, then driven to Casting Creations in Howard Lake, Minnesota. Now, Centrifuge is in the hands of the foundry. A ceramic mold has to be made at Casting Creations. First, wax rods or gates are attached to Foster's wax pieces by heating and softening the wax. These gates will make channels for the hot bronze to flow when the ceramic mold is complete. These channels also help gases to escape. After the rods are attached, a paper cup is screwed onto the rod. This will be used to form a receptacle to accept the bronze. The piece is then taken to the shell room. Here, it is placed into a liquid ceramic bath, dipped into silica or loose sand. It is sprayed for any missed spots and dunked into an aerated sand bath. When this is finished, it is hung to dry. This process is repeated several times until the ceramic buildup around the wax creates the reverse mold. This is done for each piece of centrifuge. The ceramic molds are placed into hot ovens to let the wax and the styrofoam from the cup melt out. Once the molds are cleaned out, they have to be again preheated to a temperature high enough to be ready to accept the hot bronze and also fire the ceramic. This is about 1500 degrees. For the bronze to be poured, it requires the metal ingots to be heated past the melting point to approximately 2000 degrees Fahrenheit. The bronze is checked often for temperature, and when it is hot enough, the slag is ladled off. It is then poured into a small crucible and carried over to the preheated molds. It takes 2 men to carry and pour the hot bronze. Slag is again skimmed as it is poured. The bronze fills up all the spaces where the wax was in the mold. Each piece is individually poured. Once the molds are cooled, the ceramic is broken off, exposing the bronze pieces, which are weighed, recorded, and taken to the saw, where the supporting rods and channels are cut off. The remaining bronze pieces are then sandblasted. The sand cleans any remaining residue of the plaster and metal from the saw off of the bronze. With the sandblasting complete, the pieces are checked against the mold and stacked until all the pieces have been cast in bronze. By December, all the pieces had been made, and the welding had begun. As in the styrofoam model, an armature is needed to support the heavy metal pieces as the statue is put back together. Centrifuge was reassembled piece by piece. Numbered sections were welded together, pounded, stretched, and trimmed. Some of the sections had shrunk in the process and had to be filled in. Using a bronze rod, they welded the gaps caused by the shrinkage. These welds had to be smoothed and texturized. Foster supervised and inspected the entire process. By April 2004, Centrifuge was back together and had to be sandblasted clean. Because of the large size, this was done outside of the foundry in the parking lot. They had to bring in a portable generator and sandblaster to accommodate the statue. Sandblasting cleans and gets rid of some of the marks from the welding process. Foster checked Centrifuge, marked it with chalk, and the foundry fixed the problem areas. In May of 2004, the statue was again moved into the parking lot. The patina, or the final layer of color and finish, chosen for the sculpture would have to be put on by hand, so an expert, Nancy Reiki, was brought in. She started by hosing down the statue to wash off the sand left from the blasting. Then scrubbed the statue with abrasive pads to clean off any hidden sand and bronze dust. Then hosed it down again. The statue also had to be completely free of oils from all its handling, the burn marks polished down, and other impurities gotten rid of. So Nancy and Foster, using abrasive pads, re-scrubbed the sculpture, which of course had to be hosed down again. Now it had to be dried. They use paper towels to get rid of the pockets of water. The patina will not stick to cold metal, so they use blow torches to heat it up. Once they had brought the temperature up, so it was more than warm to the touch, they concentrated on heating small areas, then added the patina with a brush. Some areas had to be re-scrubbed with the abrasive pad to tone down or spruce up the color. It was an all-day-long process. When it was agreed that the color was perfect, that the surface was scrubbed to the texture desired, it was sprayed with the sealant, packed up, and trucked to Nicollet Commons Park for installation. Excitement was high as the crane lifted 2-ton centrifuge off of the truck. Measurements were checked, and adaptations had to be made so that the sculpture would fit onto the base. Then, centrifuge was lowered onto the awaiting pedestal. Foster had also designed a stainless steel bowl that was engineered and added so water would flow from the bowl into the pool beneath Centrifuge. Marble and tile for the top of the pedestal were added, along with a granite cover, and Centrifuge was covered to await the official unveiling. On June 2, 2004, Centrifuge was dedicated and unveiled for the public.
Help me welcome Mr. Jerry Oliver.
Jerry Oliver represented the Merafi Foundation, who funded Centrifuge in its entirety.
Mr. Oliver, as a show of our appreciation for the generosity of the Merafi Foundation, we wanted to give back. Just as the Merafi Foundation gave to the City of Burnsville and to the citizens of Burnsville, we want to give back to the Merafi Foundation. So on behalf of the citizens of Burnsville, the Burnsville Foundation, the City Council, I would like to present you with this exact replica of Centrifuge.
The idea of a sculpture with a center that life flows from. A sculpture that imitates the idea of the heart of the city was achieved in Centrifuge and is now available in Nicollet Commons Park for all to enjoy.